Good evening. My name is Joe Bandel, and I am the last Rosicrucian. Tonight we're going to talk about the slippery slope of Gnosticism. Now, in the second century, people struggled with the concept of dualism, the emergence of Gnosticism, and Manicheanism. I'm going to talk about a few of these things because we need to be careful here. Remember, there are two forms of dualism, and I say two forms of Gnosticism that we need to be aware of. What I call organic Gnosticism is a loving balance of male-female opposites that celebrates life and the development of the soul through love relationships and tantrism. The other form, the traditional form of Gnosticism, is one that believes in the battle of opposites between good and evil, the battle that destroys life. So we just want to be careful because it's too easy to talk about the destructive one of good and evil and forget about the one that we're really interested in. Okay, so the Manicheanism the Manicheanists were also called the Christians of St. John the Baptist. They believe in baptism. They believed that matter was evil and spirit was good. The world was satanic. They taught reincarnation, and it became the most widespread religion in the world at the time, reaching far into Asia. Now, was this heretical? Or was it actually an influence of early Christianity? That message, baptism, matter is evil, spirit is good, the world is satanic, that sounds awful familiar. And I'm willing to just suggest that it was assimilated, a lot of these ideas were assimilated into early Christianity, even if they may not have been taught by Jesus himself. I'd like to mention Zoroastrianism in contrast, which at the time was 5 or 6 centuries older. Zoroastrianism is one of the earliest religions, and we see in its beliefs kind of a bridge between the even earlier goddess religions and the balance of male and female, what we're really looking for. So we do see an interesting influence in Zoroastrianism, which was the state religion of Persia for centuries. In Zoroastrianism, the world is good and is created by a good God. There is no devil, and it is a celebration of life. There is order and chaos. Later on, in the later period of Zoroastrianism, the concept of chaos became personified by Ahriman, but not in the beginning. There was just one path, only one path, that of truth. People were to do the right thing because it was the right thing to do. It's very simple. Make the world a better place. They believed there would be a judgment day and a Messiah. At the day of judgment, each person would be held accountable for their actions in life. Now you can see some of that is might be an influence on Christianity as well. But it is far older. And the Manicheanists were bringing in this concept of Satan, this concept of matter being evil. Now, we got to remember, put this in perspective. These early, the soul, this battle for the soul became so important as it's an offshoot of literacy, of the invention of reading and writing. And the simple people weren't able to read and write. It was only an elite group of people that actually was into the literary scene. And we'll be talking about that in my next post. But the simple people had strong bonds with nature. And they kept a religion of the heart. It was kind of paganism and the old ways. And we see that hidden. Now later on, we're going to see how these bonds with nature branch out into the teachings of Tantra and the teachings of sex as a form of soul development. But there's a big split here, and both of these categories, this is the main point that I'm trying to make in this message. There are two types of Gnosticism. And you want to be very clear which one you're talking about. And you want to be very clear which ones were the heresies. Now we're going to be seeing, as we go along, we're going to see just how anti-sexuality the Christian church, the early Christian church actually was. We've seen a little bit about that already. But there is also another religion that came in called Mandeism. That was fairly brief, and they also believed in the split between good and evil. So somehow, what seems to be happening is some people began to develop the observer self, the watcher self. They began to have a concept of self, which they called the soul. And it figured in, for example, we find that the watcher self, the observer self, in dreams, where part of us stands back and watches. That is what was considered the soul. That is what was so important. And that is what people were getting so excited about, because they believed that it proved the immortality of consciousness, the immortality of awareness. They believed it proved that awareness, personal awareness, went on after the death of the physical body. And they were getting fanatical about it, because this was the biggest thing that had come around. But the thing is, it was only available to the elites, because it was actually part of reading and writing. That's why the move into the head tripping. That's why the move away from the common people, away from the common religions. And it was also to prevent the common people from developing their own egos, their own sense of self, their own souls. We're starting to see the beginning of social manipulation. We're starting to see the beginning of the master class. And it has to do with literacy, with the elite people and their reading and writing and their superior intellect, even though the common people had heart and they had love in their heart. And in the long run, self-esteem has a lot more to do with heart than it has to do with the intellect and the mind. And self-esteem also has a lot more to do with survival, with competency, than it has to do with intellect. So we're seeing right in the 2nd century already this split of where let's keep the uneducated lower classes down and let's take sex away from them, because sex is dangerous. It develops the soul, and we don't want these people developing their souls. We want to stay away from that. Well, I'm running out of time. I covered what I think is important here. Visit my website, share this with people, and if you feel like donating a little bit, the donation link is on my website. The link is below. Any donations are wonderful. I could certainly use them. Buy me a cup of coffee and a donut if you really appreciate some of this stuff. It's going to get very interesting pretty quick. So hang in there. Have a good evening.